Can you please share some information on L1 visa? Can my company apply for a green card on L1 visa? I'm coming to the US on an L1 visa. Will my spouse be able to work there? Can I change my company on L1 visa? Everyone talks about student visas and H1B. Can you also talk about the L1 visa? The last one hit me really hard because I came on an L1 visa, and it's true, no one really talks about the L1 visas in the US. But that's going to change today because in this video, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about an L1 visa in the US. In this video, we are going to learn all about eligibility to processing time, difference between L1A and L1B, and even the process to get a green card on an L1 visa. I've personally done it, so I'm going to bake in all of my experiences. Hi guys, I'm Priya from It's OKR and welcome to our series US Visa Simplified. So this is a series where I explain different US visas and their processes in a way that is easy to understand and you will at least have a broad overview about it. And if you're new today, It's OKR is a content platform for South Asian immigrants and we aim to educate, entertain and empower them. So without further ado, let's get started with the basics. What is an L1 visa? So the L1 visa is a non-immigrant visa that allows multinational companies to transfer certain employees from their foreign offices to work in the United States temporarily. Now it's a popular choice for companies that need to move their key employees to the US to basically either manage operations, oversee projects, and share some specialized knowledge. Now this allows the company to maintain its global presence while also benefiting from the skills and experience of its employees. So what does all of this mean? I'm going to explain with my example. I used to work for Google in India, and when Google wanted to send me to the US, they sent me on an L1 visa, which means that my L1 visa is attached to my company that I am working for. Remember this because I will refer to this later in the video that will make everything much more clear. So moving on, let's understand what the different types of L1 visas are. So broadly, the L1 visa is divided into two subcategories, the L1A visa and the L1B visa. The L1A visa is a category for managers and executives who are being transferred to the US office, that is a subsidiary, a branch, an affiliate or a parent company of the foreign employer. This is the L1A visa that I came in on as well. Now what is an L1B visa? This category is for employees with specialized knowledge who are being transferred to the US office of the same multinational company. So specialized knowledge is typically going to refer to as advanced knowledge or expertise in the company's products or processes or technologies and different areas such like that. Again, there are obviously a lot of intricacies involved in what's defined as a specialized knowledge, but this video is not for that. You can comment on this video and I'll happily share more information about that because I have plenty of friends who moved here on an L1B visa. So now we are going to spend some time understanding the L1 visa requirements. To get an L1 visa, there are certain eligibilities that the employer needs to show that there are, and then the employee or the person receiving the visa also needs to show. Now let's first discuss this from an employer perspective. What is it that the employer needs to show? To qualify for an L1 visa, the multinational company must have a qualifying relationship with the US company where the L1 employee is basically going to work. So the multinational company must also be doing business in the United States and at least one other country for as long as the L1 beneficiaries stay in the US. Now let's understand from the employee perspective. The employee or the person who's going to move must have worked for the multinational company for a minimum period of one continuous year with the last 3 years prior to the transfer in the United States. So if you've had a question around the fact that, hey, I am here on an F1 visa or I am here on an H4 visa, can my company apply for an L1 visa? This is a really important piece for you to understand because if you were with that company in the last 3 years and you spent at least 1 year with that company, you will be eligible if your employee is ready to now file an L1 for you. And I answered this because I get many questions around this and I thought this would be helpful. Okay, so coming back to the perspective of what is it from the employee's perspective. Now the employee must also have worked for the foreign company in an executive managerial position or in a specialized knowledge capacity and must be entering the US to perform a similar role. The L1 visa applicants must signify their intention to return back to their home country at the expiration of their L1 status because it is a temporary visa. L1 visa holders must only work for the US company through which the visa was granted for, as long as their L1 status is valid. So in simple terms, once you move to the US, you cannot switch companies on an L1 visa. There are other requirements for the L1 visa, but they are pretty much dependent upon the type of L1 visa the foreign company is petitioning. So now we are going to spend some time understanding the requirements for establishing a new office in the US and how to qualify for an L1 visa. To petition for an L1 visa, the multinational companies must provide a proof of a physical space in the US, and they should demonstrate the financial ability to pay the L1 foreign workers' wages. The reason I'm covering this is we get questions around the fact that, hey, my friend has this particular company in the US and can I move to the US with an L1 visa with that company? So as long as there are certain requirements that the company fulfills, only then that company is basically able to qualify for the L1 visa. So now let's understand the L1 visa duration. The maximum duration for an L1 visa is 7 years and the maximum duration for an L1B visa is 5 years. So L1A visa is 7 years, L1B visa is 5 years. L1A visa holders can apply for visa extension twice to reach in the 7 years. Again, there is a little bit of nuance in how it works, because personally for me, the first L1 visa was given for 2 years, the next one was also given for 2 years, and then basically I had to go for a third extension. But regularly, you generally would only need to go through 2 extensions. So I spoke about how generally L1 extensions work, but if your company is sending you to set up an office in the US, then the requirement or extension is a little bit different. So organizations petitioning for an L1 visa for the purpose of establishing a new office in the US will usually be granted the visa for an initial 1 year and can extend it in 2-year terms provided they meet the extension requirements. So now let's understand the L1 visa application process. There are 2 ways to obtain an L1 visa: the regular process or the individual process, and the blanket petition. We will discuss the blanket petition in a bit, but before that there are 3 major steps in the regular or individual petition. Filing form DS-160 or the non-immigrant visa application, your company filing form or I-129, which is a petition for a non-immigrant worker. So in this, the company submits the L1 petition at a USCIS service center. The company must file the petition at least 45 days before the expected start of the L1 beneficiary. So now let's understand what happens next. The USCIS will evaluate both the forms and assess whether the petitioning company meets its requirement for the L1 visa, like I had discussed earlier. Then it's going to be consular processing, where the company sends the approved forms to the L1 applicant, who will then take that to their application documents to the US consulate or embassy in their home country. So the consular officer there will conduct an interview and decide on whether the applicant meets the full requirements of an L1 visa. So now in some cases there might be a request for evidence or an RFE or other documents that might be required before the visa application is processed. But once the consulate approves the applicant, the USCIS is going to generally issue the visa. This is a very popular option for a lot of smaller companies who then go through this individual or regular application process. The required documentation for an L1 visa petition is a lot, and we are going to share the link to our guide on the topic for this website. You can refer to it for the detailed list of documents. Now let's understand what is the application process for the blanket petitioning. So an L1 blanket visa petition is a way for qualified foreign companies to transfer several employees to the US at once under a single petition. The application process is simpler than required for an L1 visa, but your visa still needs to be approved by a consular office. So in India, the blanket petition visa interviews happen only in the Chennai consulate. So just as an FYI, my L1 blanket visa was actually rejected. Once my L1 blanket was rejected in Chennai, and if you want me to share my entire experience, please leave that in comments and I'll create a video around that. What I did was I worked with my company to file for an L1 individual or an L1 regular visa like we discussed. I followed the same process like I mentioned in the video. We collected the documentation, it was sent, I got an RFE. We collected more documentation, and once we had the final application approved, I went to the Hyderabad consulate this time and finally got the stamping done, and which is why I'm in the US. We've gone through plenty of these visa application processes, rejections, making it happen, which is why we also started It's OKR to ensure we share our experiences and make it easy for you. If you watched it so far, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It's going to help us. Now let's move on. So now let's discuss the L1 visa cost. This video is being filmed in November 2023, and that's the cost right now. The cost is basically dependent on several factors. The general cost is $460 to file your form I-129 with USCIS. Now Now, an additional 500 anti-fraud fee may be required, an additional 2,500 fee for premium processing, and these costs are always paid by the company sponsoring the visa. Now that we understand the application fee, let's understand what the benefits are of an L1 visa. Relatively, there are a lot of fewer eligibility requirements. The L1 visa only requires you to be a manager or an executive or a specialized knowledge worker in a multinational company in order to qualify. Yes, this can be extremely stringent requirement, and that is what they're checking in these interviews and applications. But compared to the eligibility criteria for an O1 visa and the lottery and at least a bachelor's degree for an H1 visa, this is still much better. Now, there is no quota limit. L1 visas are easier to obtain than H1B visas because there is no quota limit for an L1 visa and they can be filed at any time of the year, while an H1B visa has an annual quota limit and can only be filed on the first business day of April each year. If you want us to create more videos on H1B, leave that in comments as well. Now, moving on, the immediate family members can also transfer to the US on an L1 visa. Holder may bring their legal spouse or their young unmarried children below 21 years old along with them to the US. The USCIS classifies them as dependents and issues them the L2 dependent visa, which makes the L2 visa even more appealing to spouses because they're eligible to work here based on their status. They don't even have to apply for a work permit anymore. Now, the next benefit is dual intent. The L1 visa is a dual intent visa, meaning the L1 visa holders may file for their green card without violating their L1 status. There are also no minimum educational requirements. The L1 visa applicants are not required to have a minimum educational qualification in order to be eligible. This is unlike the H1B visa, which requires applicants to have at least a bachelor's degree before they can apply. Of course, it's unlikely that a manager or an executive or even someone with specialized knowledge professional will not have some sort of a formal education, but at least the educational qualification is not listed as a condition in the USCIS website. Okay, now let's understand the limitations of an L1 visa. The candidates must already be employed, and not just any kind of employment. They must be an executive, manager, or have specialized knowledge worker for at least one continuous year. Plus, the company they work for must be large enough to have a qualifying organization in the US. Now, you have a fixed maximum stay period. Once the L1 visa holder has reached their maximum allowed duration of stay, there can be no more extensions, and they must either switch to a different visa that allows them to stay longer or file for a permanent residency. If not, then they must depart the US and have their employer apply for a new L1 visa. This is unlike the H1 visa, where once you get your I-140, you can keep extending until your H1B visa is eligible to apply for the green card. Now, let's understand what I mean by that. Basically, say you are on L1 visa and you finished 5 years and you have an I-140. However, if the priority date is not current and you don't end up getting your green card in that 7 years, if you're on an L1A visa, you must switch to an H1 visa and with that I-140, because H1 visa's requirement is that on an H1B with I-140 you can keep extending, you can be here. On an L1 visa, just because you have your I-140, you cannot continue to stay. You must try to get your green card within that 7 or 5 year period depending upon the type of L1 visa you are on. Again, I'm sharing this because we did move to an H1 visa. Of course, we went through the EB1 process to get our green cards. However, I wanted to throw it out there because we get a lot of questions on, I am reaching my 6-year limit, I have my I-140, my priority date is not current, what should I do? You have to go to an H1B or a different visa type. So there are limited type of eligible companies on L1 as well. The L1 visa is only available to multinational companies that have a branch, parent, subsidiary or affiliate in the US, like I covered in the video earlier. Additionally, other work visas like the H1B allow you to be employed with any other US employer, but with the L1 visa, it restricts you to be only sponsored by the company that actually got you here. So simple terms, if you move here on an L1 visa, you cannot switch companies. Again, you cannot change your job. Remember, I told you to remember that an L1 visa holder's visa is attached to the company they are working for. It is because of this. Unlike those on H1B visa who can transfer their H1B visa to another company, L1 visa holders cannot do that while staying in the US, which means if you are laid off, they need to find a job in the same company or a subsidiary of the parent company. So this is extremely important to know given the current job market and the situation and layoffs. You just cannot move to a different different company. You have to find something in the same company. Now we have created a video about H1B versus L1 visa, the differences and the similarities that I can also leave in case you want to check it out. So now let's talk about the green card process on an L1 visa. So on an L1A visa to green card, for an L1A visa holder can apply for a green card through the EB1C immigrant visa program. This program is designed for managers and executives of qualifying US organizations. The process is relatively simple and does not require the complex perm labor certification process. To apply, the US employer must file an I-140 petition with the USCIS. Once approved, the candidate can file for an adjustment of status to permanent resident through I-485 form if their priority date is current. This is the process that I actually ended up going through, and it can take around 8 months to a year to complete. Again, the documentation is extensive, so that you might need some additional window for that. Now let's understand the process to get a green card from L1B visa. The most ideal green cards available to L1B visa holders are the EB2 and EB3 visas. The application process is long and can take up to 2 years, with the perm labor certification being the main limiting factor. And once the perm is approved, the company files for your I-140, and once that is approved, you can file for your adjustment of status to get a green card. However, since the L1B visa is only for 5 years, there is no chance that as an Indian, your priority date will get current in the current time as you're going through an EB2 or EB3 process. So the best option for you will be to move to another visa, either an H1B or an L1A. Okay, that's it guys. This was literally everything that you need to know about an L1 visa in the US, and I hope you guys found this video helpful. And if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Now, we do a lot of hard work to get this content to you in a simple manner. ChatGPT or Bard does not share scripts in this language. It's all us. So please let us know what topics you would need us to cover. We'll try to do a lot of research and really work with people who've gone through these visa processes to make it as personal and relatable and super helpful to you. And if things are not going your way, remember, it's okay. Until next time, have a wonderful day.